cannot have anything nice.
This is not how I thought today was gonna go.
How and why does it sound exactly like a bread truck? Hi, I'm Jamie. This is Dead Dodge Garage, and today I'm going to show you something I bet you've never heard of. The Perkins Plymouth. Maybe we'll shut it off. It's kind of loud. Yes. Thank you. This is a special and exceedingly unique 1959 Plymouth four-door sedan. On the title it says Plymouth Savoy, but nowhere on the car itself will you find that name. Typically on a 1959 Savoy, you'll find the Savoy name right here on the quarter panel. Instead of that, we find an older Plymouth badge and something really neat. It appears to say Perkins Diesel. Before we gaze upon the wonderment living under the hood of this thing, let's take in everything else the 59 Plymouth has to offer. Being a 59 model, this thing existed right in the middle of Virgil Exner's forward look era at Chrysler. The idea was that these cars were supposed to look like the future. They were supposed to be unique among American automakers' designs at that time. And unique they were, for better, or in many cases, for weirder. Now at this point, I've featured all kinds of forward look cars on the channel. There was the 59 Saratoga I owned for a time that sat right here, very broken. There was a 58 Plymouth convertible that Tom with Rocket Restorations owned. 57, whatever. A 61 Polara, and I'm sure there have been more. I've always thought forward look cars and Exner designs in general were kind of weird, and really it would be hard to argue that point. Look at the shape of this windshield and the door there. Very strange. Fins large and small were an important detail on most forward look cars, and this one certainly has some. There are some obvious design through lines that can be seen from the beginning to the end of the forward look era, but one of the biggest, probably the wraparound windshield. This started in 1955 and continued through the 1964 year. It would be really hard to talk about a late 1950s Plymouth without mentioning Christine. Christine, of course, the famous car from the movie/book of the same name. This car is not all that unlike Christine. 59 is a little bit different, particularly in the eyebrow area of the fender here, and the grille design is not exactly the same, but again, there is an obvious family relation. The basic lines of the car, very similar. The fins are not the same though. For 1959, as in previous years, there is essentially one Plymouth body. It could be had as a 2- or 4-door sedan, a 2-door hardtop, or a convertible, also a wagon. But they're essentially all the same car, and the difference between them is going to be the trim level. This is a super basic one. Now again, it doesn't say Savoy on it, but that's basically what it is. The easy way to tell that is the single plain trim spear all the way down the side here. A Belvedere would have an additional trim line coming down off the bottom of that. It may have had rocker trim too, I'm not totally sure on that. And a Fury would have a little trim panel thingy on the quarter, not totally unlike a 57 Chevrolet. It's actually even weirder than that, but you get the point. And there were certainly other differences as well. Interior, the seats, the materials, the dash may have been different from model to model. I'm not an expert on any of that, but the important note is, essentially, a Plymouth is a Plymouth. Obviously, with the introduction of the compact Valiant and then the downsizing for 1962, it wouldn't be long until there were separate body lines in compact midsize and full sizes, but that hadn't happened yet for 1959. This particular car, of course, is resplendent in a fresh coat of two-tone turquoise and white on top. It may surprise you to learn that this is actually, give or take, the original color. And the reason that would be surprising, well, if you've spotted this sign in the back window anyway, then you kind of already know where we're going here. I've already strongly alluded to the existence of the little diesel engine under this hood, so I guess it's time to finally show you that. Wow. This is the venerable Perkins P-Series. This is a 4-cylinder engine, so a P4. I believe it displaces 192 cubic inches. The technology in this basic engine dates back to like the 30s. If you know marine diesels or industrial diesels, you ought to know Perkins. These things aren't necessarily known to be horsepower machines, but they are long-lived and efficient. You'll notice the distinct lack of a turbocharger here. This is a naturally aspirated diesel engine. You also may notice it's not particularly large. It's a pretty tall engine, and I'm sure it's very heavy. I don't actually know what it weighs right offhand, but it's got plenty of room to move around in here. Apparently the Perkins P4 produced something on the order of 55 horsepower. You're not going to set the world on fire with that. According to this stupid AI Google search thing, which I hate and you should too, the 230 flathead 6-cylinder in 1959 was making somewhere between 130 and 140 horsepower. And depending on which version we're talking about, the poly-headed A-series engine for 1959 was making around or even well over 200 horsepower. So why on earth would anyone want to put a decidedly low horsepower, low output disappointment of a little teeny tiny diesel engine under the hood of their Plymouth? Easy answer: fuel economy. Let's say you own a taxi cab business in the 1950s. Your largest expense by far is fuel, keeping your taxis crisscrossing the city night and day. What if you could save 30 to 50% on that fuel bill? Well, you could, with a diesel under the hood. Also, diesel is cheaper. The same cannot be said today, but that's a totally different story. That is why this car exists. It was intended to operate all day long, cheaply. It was intended to live forever and save the company that owned it bucket loads of money on fuel. This was actually a relatively common sight on European roads in the 1950s and into the early 1960s. Not so much here in America, though. The P4 conversion was developed jointly between Perkins Diesel, a company called Hunter NV in Antwerp, Belgium, and Chrysler's Antwerp subsidiary. The P4 engine was chosen for this program, and those companies jointly figured out how to fit it into the Plymouth. As I understand, this combination was used early in the 1950s in Europe. Primarily, these taxis were driving around in Belgium, but they could be found in other countries as well. But a gentleman named David Viger in Detroit, Michigan, thought that this was a great idea that should be brought to American shores as well. Around 1958, he formed a company called American Diesel Corporation. And essentially, they did exactly the same swap on American-produced Plymouths, specifically to be utilized as taxis. I consider myself a bit of a diesel enthusiast. Most of my enthusiasm has always been pointed toward Cummins engines, although I do also enjoy a good two-stroke Detroit or even a Caterpillar here or there. I think putting a diesel engine under the hood of a classic American car is brilliant. Like me, you may think small diesel engine, classic American car, and immediately think of the sorts of chunks of iron rolling around the roads in Cuba. But that's another matter entirely. The thing you have to understand is that this conversion would have been expensive, and the fuel savings alone probably weren't going to be worth it for the typical consumer. The only place this really made sense was in use as a taxi. For such a strange niche combination, we are very lucky to have all of this info. The reason we have all of this info is this particular issue of the Plymouth Bulletin. You'll notice there's a Plymouth Diesel on the cover. But it's not just any Plymouth Diesel. Nope, it's this Plymouth Diesel. Yeah, if you do a Google search for 1959 Perkins Plymouth, you're going to find exactly one of those. Oh, apparently the Autopian has covered this car. Neat! Thanks to the uniqueness of this car and the existence of the internet, we can actually trace its history through various posts on various forums and even on Facebook. We can see what it looked like before it was painted. Amazing. Here's a shot of the interior with the book I just showed you sitting on the seat where I found it. I haven't even shown you the lovely refinished upholstery in here. Well, here it is. Resplendent in various shades of brown. Look at this. The seat material is faded, but there is an obvious shadow where that book has been sitting on this seat for years. I just cannot stress how amazing this is. These posts were in 2008. That's apparently when this car was pulled out of a storage unit covered in dust and with a spare transmission and a bunch of rebuild parts in the trunk. But all of these people on these various forums have done tons of research and have broken down the number plate under the hood. 100% this car was ordered and built as a taxi. It is specified as a Plymouth 6 model, and it was originally EE mint green. I've mentioned Allpar a couple times in the past, and they do also have an article on the Perkins Plymouths. Here's the back of I want to say this is 56 Plymouth, and there's the same Perkins logo. With all of that information, all of that provenance, all of the research that has been done about this exact car, it's still mysterious. You see, the American-built diesel-powered taxis should say Savoy here. This badge, which is from an earlier Plymouth, is typical of an export car, or a car built outside of the United States. This was a dealer tag from a dealer in Georgia. I don't have the tag. I'd really like to find a replacement for it. The assumption is that it was sold used there. I don't have any idea how we'll ever solve the puzzle of whether this thing was an export car or not. I do know that it spent many years in Georgia. From the Atlanta dealer tag on the back till at least the late 1970s, this car was in operation there. There's an employee parking sticker for Delta Airlines here on the bumper. And I know it made its way from Georgia to Tennessee and then to Washington here at some point. Now, I've been following this car myself for quite some time. You see, the previous owner, I believe the owner that restored it and got it back into working condition as you see it now, passed away. A family friend acquired the car and then sold it. I saw it listed for sale again after that for, let's say, significantly more money, and then it disappeared. Now, when I say disappeared, I mean it disappeared from Facebook Marketplace, but not the face of the earth. In fact, a gentleman named Jason Kronk bought it, and he actually made a couple videos on his YouTube channel about the car. I haven't had a chance to watch his videos yet, but I will be doing that, and I suggest you do too if you want to know more. I was excited about this car the moment I learned about it. I followed it through the different listings where it was available for sale publicly, and at that time I certainly couldn't afford it or even really justify its existence in my life. Over the last month, I've been working on parting with some various projects around here. There are just too many cars, too many things that I will never get to. I've listed a few things for sale, and in response to the ad for one of those things, I got a message from Jason. First, he offered me a Ram truck, which typically I'd be pretty excited about, but I'm kind of Ram trucked up right at the moment. Then he asked if I knew anyone that was interested in rare, interesting Chrysler products, and he sent me one picture of this car. Because I've already poured through all of this information and learned all about the Perkins Plymouth in previous months, I knew exactly what it was when I saw it and said, give me that. So now I own this glorious machine. And rather unfortunately, the number of chargers in the shop is down to 1 from a career high of 2. Am I sad my 69 Charger is gone? A little bit. Was this a dumb trade? I think a bunch of people are going to think so. Am I happy? Oh, I'm very happy. Diesel Plymouth, dude. Bye-bye. See you later. It would be hard to imagine something much further from a 1969 Charger than a 1959 Perkins-powered Plymouth. Maybe I'm insane, maybe I'm out of my mind, but I'm really excited about this thing. Now, there are some mild issues, at least one of which I've already shown you, the fact the shifter linkage is totally falling apart. There's some little electrical things, a squealing belt problem, and also, this thing is literally the slowest vehicle on Earth. Or it is right now. Might have some ideas for that. Oh, also it leaks engine oil. And it smells. You know, what's really crazy is it came with a full tank of diesel. And even crazier, the fuel gauge works. Trust but verify. I gave it a slosh test, and yeah, it's brimmed. In addition to being painfully slow, obnoxious, and stinky, there are some other known issues. The heater is currently bypassed because the heater core is bad. Those are available online, but they are not cheap. Oh, note the Model 706 heater box had to be modified to fit the Perkins because the back of the valve cover would be in it. Check out the 2-blade cooling fan because diesel, this thing is going to be super efficient and it probably hardly needs a fan at all. The original radiator is far from the prettiest thing I've ever seen. Again, diesel, cooling's like semi-extra. There is a lot to learn about this simple, somewhat archaic diesel engine. To do that, instead of poking around the engine compartment here, I've got something way better. This is a spare Perkins P4C engine. But not just any Perkins P4C engine. This is a spare Perkins out of another Plymouth, or maybe a Dodge or something. I don't know. But it has the special oil pan. It has the mount brackets. It has the special bell housing. We could build another one. Or, you know, we could hot rod this engine and then drop it in the 59. The fact that a previous owner of this car found another car in a junkyard somewhere or something and managed to procure another complete original Perkins engine from one of these cars just boggles the mind. It's good that this is here because finding spare parts, yeah, challenging. As mentioned, most of my experience with diesels is related to the Cummins engine. I've had a good few 12 valves, 24 valves, and the one common rail in my 03 Ram, but I've also had a couple 4B engines. I recognized this manufacturer of the injection pump, CAV, right away because my 4B engines were equipped with these. Not this exact pump, of course. This is a BPE. This is old technology, but honestly, it's not all that different from what we have on mechanical diesels in the more modern era. The peculiar thing about this BPE injection pump is it's regulated by this. This is a pneumatic governor. In addition to the complete spare engine with a spare injection pump, there's another spare injection pump. It appears to have been rebuilt, judging by the tags, and it's in a bag. This was actually in the trunk in a box with some spare filters and some other useful things. This is the governor I'm talking about. Now again, this is a pneumatically controlled governor. It's a pretty strange system. It uses an air signal through this connection, and this is actually what controls injector flow. I don't know what the average Dead Dodge Garage viewer is going to know about diesels, but if you do know them well, you know a diesel does not need a throttle. It doesn't have vacuum in the manifold. Well, that's not the case here. For this system that controls the BPE pump with that pneumatic governor, there is a throttle blade. And there's actually a sensing tube connected to this throttle unit that goes all the way down to that pneumatic governor. Because of the existence of this throttle blade, vacuum actually can be found in this intake manifold, and I think that's why there's a nipple on here to run the heater controls inside the car. They don't actually work right now, but that's this whole other thing. There's a set screw in here with a jam nut around it, and apparently if you loosen the jam nut and then back the set screw out, you will increase fueling to the engine. I'm gonna try that. According to documentation from the conversion company, these cars were supposed to be able to do 70 miles an hour and accelerate. It does neither of those things right now. The cap is actually already off of this set screw. Notice it is like bottomed out all the way. I wiped the grease off. That is like wax pen or something. That is clearly meant to indicate that that screw is set where it is and it's not to be tampered with. We're going to tamper with it anyway. I strongly suspect this injection pump has been rebuilt as well, judging by that secondary tag down there below the CAV tag. We're going to turn the fuel up until it smokes and then dial it back, and hopefully it'll be happy and not blow up. It's a bit later because I went to license this car. It actually has Washington plates now. Anyway, I did loosen that jam nut and back that screw out maybe turn and a half, 2 turns. Fired it up, revved it a couple times lightly, and there was a little bit more fuel smoke. I don't know if there will be under a load, though. That's really the question. I've got the car lined up on the lift now, and so I want to get this thing up in the air and check a few things. First, I want to make sure nothing important is falling off the bottom. Second, I need to tighten the shifter linkage. Third, I need to adjust this front left brake. And finally, I am going to try and pinpoint the oil leak if I can, because this thing's leaving yucky little puddles everywhere. Well, it didn't take me long to find an issue. It shouldn't do any of that stuff. And the more I look at the 59, the more I like it. Yes, it's funky, but it's funky in a cool way. I will point out that this front bumper has unfortunately seen some stuff. I could definitely straighten that some if I were to pull it off the car. Probably not going to do that, at least not anytime soon. How do you like this grille center emblem? It's got a sailing ship. Oh, good Lord. You know, I kind of wish I hadn't looked. I think the main drip is coming down from that oil filter housing. I don't know if that's a stud through the middle and maybe it needs a new O-ring or something like that. This is interesting. Apparently the engine is like designed to rock around and there are little limiting pads. Well, good news. I don't know about the oil filter thing, but I have found one leak. All of the bolts on the timing cover are completely loose. The cover does appear to be silicone sealed. Hopefully there's still some silicone in there. Looking at the other motor, which has the entire cover loose, I don't think resealing this would be too big of a deal. The nice thing is no water goes through it. That water pump actually just kind of mounts through it. There's no water pipe through that cover at all. So you would pull the crank pulley off, you know, the crank pulley that rubs on this lower radiator hose, and then loosen the pump and then unbolt the cover. Okay, glad I didn't just hit the highway with this one. That's one issue for sure. Also, the idler arm's loose. I don't know why every Mopar idler arm is always loose. They just is. I've just noticed something very interesting. At least it's very interesting to me. This lower control arm is almost exactly the same as the lower control arms on a late B body, like the 73 toolbox Charger we restored here. I'm sure that's because the late B body parts are essentially C body parts, and C body parts are essentially updated full-size car parts. Note, being a 1959 model, this car does still have a full frame. Now I'm certainly seeing some rust in places under here, but this thing is pretty darn solid. We've got this. We've got a spot at the back of the rocker on the passenger side. And I think the main issue there is this is all packed full of mud. Okay, this might help to explain why my entire life reeks of diesel after driving this car like a mile. Anyway, I think this is the worst rust spot in the car. It's right at the back of the passenger side rocker, and again, it is totally packed full of mud. I'm going to try and scrape and vacuum as much of that out as I can. My 55 Imperial is rusted in the same spot and also into the corners of the floor pretty bad. The parking brake in this car does work, kinda. Needs an adjustment. The handle comes all the way out, but even so, it doesn't really hold the best. That may be because the rear of this transmission leaks and it's totally doused in oil. Also, someone's had this apart and we almost lost this pin. In one of the pictures of this car from the internet, there was an overdrive transmission in the trunk. This is not that. This is just a conventional 3-speed. Honestly, that's probably fine. Reportedly, this car has managed something like 30 miles a gallon without an overdrive. This is a diesel return line to the tank, and it leaks really bad. I'm thinking probably right here where it's actively wet, but maybe a little bit here too. Apparently over time, diesel fuel removes undercoating pretty good. Judging by the paint, the manual steering box has been rebuilt. The steering is actually excellent in this car. There is no front sway bar. This is not surprising. But I noticed in cornering, the body roll really wasn't all that bad. Maybe that's because it wasn't going very fast, because, it doesn't do that. Going to need ball joints someday. If you aren't hip to it, these older Chrysler products have a crazy dual wheel cylinder braking system. This was called full contact braking, total contact, something like that. It was a Chrysler design system that they abandoned not long after this in favor of Bendix drum brakes. There's a wheel cylinder at the top, there's a wheel cylinder at the bottom. Each one actuates one shoe. There's a metal line inside that drum brake that connects them. It's super wacky, parts are expensive, and nearly impossible to find. I don't think it's the biggest deal in the world to replace these with later Bendix brakes. This front left one does work, but doesn't work as well as the front right, so the thing tends to pull to the right when you hit the brakes. I don't love that, and I was hoping I could adjust it. I don't think that's a thing. Dude, this tie rod end wasn't just loose. It was loose. It was fall off and kill somebody loose. This is why cotter pins are important, but also torquing parts you remove. I just happened to glance at the inside of this passenger side wheel, hub, drum brake area, and I noticed there are 2 castle nuts here, also missing cotter pins. So I put a wrench on them, and they spin, and so do these ones. So I guess we are getting into some brakes here, because those cannot be loose. And I can't even line these up to get pins in them because the bolts are just spinning. Oh yeah, wheel bolts. I forgot wheel bolts were a thing at Chrysler in the 50s. Another cotter pin not bent in any way. I've never been one to insist on perfection, let alone claim I'm at all capable of it. But I would like to do a relatively large road trip with this car in the near future, and it would be really great if at least most of the important components stayed attached to it for that. Anyway, here are those 4 bolts viewed from the other side. You can see they're able to just spin here. 2 of these just secure the drum assembly to the spindle, but the other 2, the longer ones that use castle nuts, actually hold this steering arm on. If that were to come loose, bad times are gonna ensue. Yeah, these weren't like finger loose or anything, but they were obviously not tight. And again, not pinned. So that's fixed now. Decided to check the left side and it's just as bad. So we're pulling that drum too. Ooh, spider. Pulling the driver's front wheel now. Of course, because this is the driver's side on an old Chrysler product, these wheel bolts are threaded backwards. The brakes on this side don't look too bad either. Don't worry about the little broken chunk. That's part of the experience. Now I'm gonna tighten these bolts, clean these off with some brake clean, and then put it all together like it never happened. The front's back together, and I was just about to put the car back on the ground so I could torque those front wheels, and then I could drive it again. Just remember there are a bunch of things underneath I still wanted to do. Anyway, I decided to check the rear wheels. The rear left, everything's awesome. The rear right, everything is not awesome. This should not do any of that. Okay, that's not what I expected. I figured loose lug studs. Nope, loose axle flange. If you know these cars and you've had to take these apart before, you know these are usually super tight and like all C's solid together. This one has been taken apart and it was never retorqued or pinned. Are you sensing a recurring theme on this car? I am, and I don't like it. That's fine, these are problems we can fix. Probably with some Uggy Duggies, I guess. Yeah, turns out if you tighten the 2 parts of your axle shaft together, your wheels stay put. Europeans hate when I call these cotter pins. They call them split pins. But here in America, if you try to buy these in a store, they're going to say cotter pins on the box. I elected to pull the fourth hubcap just so I could take a look in here. Missing the cotter pin and missing a left-handed wheel bolt. Lord knows where I'll find another one of those. I'm not wild about this overspray. You can see some of that around the hubcap. I'm also not wild about this. This looks like horrible pitty rust that's been painted over. Self-loosening shift lever nuts on manual transmissions in classic cars has been a recurring theme in my life, particularly on Dale's Demon. This just keeps happening. The front one there is the 2-3 shift lever. That is the one that was backed off like all the way, and the one that left me almost stranded in the coffee drive-thru earlier. I'm going to snug these up, and hopefully they'll hang on for a while. Clattery old diesels like this are pretty much designed to leak oil everywhere and be covered in horrible blackness. I did give this a once-over with a couple rags. I tried to wipe up the active drips and the wettest spots. Not that it really looks like I did anything. Hopefully this will help me identify any future drips. If this really did make a difference and it stops doing this on the ground, well, maybe we'll get in here with some degreaser and a wire brush and actually clean it up. But I'm still pretty confident we've got a dribble coming from that filter housing, so I'll have to deal with that at some point. I did tend to a couple other things. The parking brake is at its full adjustment already, so there's nothing I can do with that. I cleaned it off with some brake clean. It's going to be disgusting again before long, but at least I tried. Cleaned up this return fuel line. It might actually be dripping from that area, which has been rubbing on the Z-bar, the clutch bell crank, for like decades. This is better, I guess, but I didn't actually fix the leak. Oh, this other inner tie rod on the driver's side was not loose like the passenger was, but it wasn't torqued or pinned either, so I've fixed that. Glad I actually checked before pinning it because this rear left hub nut was loose too. I think there's a lesson in here somewhere. Don't trust anyone's work. And that includes yourself, you know. Double check your own work. I'm a pretty good mechanic, but stuff happens. Obviously, whoever was doing the work on this car had the best of intentions. You get sidetracked, I don't know. Double check your suspension stuff. Let's just leave it at that. Did you notice this trim piece had migrated? I fixed it, but it's also bent and kinked. Unfortunately, the door piece has contacted that multiple times, it seems. Oh, I don't think I've mentioned the good news here is these are actually recent tires. They've got 2018 date code, so those will not be killing me today. The same thing applies to lug nuts, or bolts in this case. This is something that's bit me 3 times, and if I hadn't checked it on this car, that could have been 4. Just because a car was driving does not mean the lugs on the wheels are torqued properly. Check them. I don't think I've actually shown you the trunk yet. There is some light rust over here, but overall it's pretty darn good. We still have an original trunk mat, which is amazing. I put the spare injection pump back in that box because you never know. Filters in there, some spare diesel oil, some spare material from the seats being reupholstered. I am happy to see a box of window sweeps. Some of these might be old. Maybe they're just aging sitting in this box, but they look to be in good shape. I think we're going to need a few of those. We've got a spare 59 grill and then half of another one. And we've got spare headlight eyebrow trims. There's a full-size spare in here that matches the other tires and a 5th hubcap. I don't know if these are actually the right hubcaps, but it's what we have. A factory spare tire jack we won't be using. Look at the size of that filler neck. It's gigantic. You could definitely stack some music gear in this trunk. We'll be testing that theory at some point. Oh. Good springs. Alan and I were musing about a possible name for this car earlier. Well, it turns out it already has one. Perky. Now that none of the wheels are going to fall off, I would like to drive this thing one more time. I'd like to see if my fuel adjustment made any change. Anytime I go anywhere near this engine, I get absolutely greasy and disgusting. Even the camera is greasy and disgusting. I don't know about you, but I've always had this thing about cars bursting into flames. Like, I would prefer they not do that. And so to that end, I just taped up this positive battery cable because it was very cooked right here, totally down to just bare wire. And the only thing keeping it off metal is this bundle of wires. So yeah, I guess we're going to need a positive battery cable in the future. This is a big, long, gigantic, heavy-duty one too, so that'll be fun to buy. Well, that reminds me, I haven't shown you the starter yet. Look at this crazy thing. Look at the solenoid on the back of that. It's the size of a small house. Thankfully, this starter's been rebuilt, and well, with any luck, it'll live a long and happy life. There's the positive battery cable over here under the heater box. This thing's just gotta go. All right, I declare this 59 Perkins Plymouth open for now. It's getting a bit dark out, so I wanted to show you this. Working lights. The brake lights work, the rear blinkers work. There are no front blinkers, just front parking lights, but I'm not too worried about that. Look, we've even got a license plate light, but only because I shaved a bunch of overspray off of that lens. We've even got dash lights. Look how green they are. Headlights, high beams. The bright switch is super hard to press for some reason. Indicator works and everything. Oh, we don't have flashers in the dash. That's slightly inconvenient. We only have 2 high beams. That's weird. All right, put that on the list. Nice. It almost starts like a 12-valve Cummins. Once it's warm anyway. The light in the clock even works. The clock itself seems to be dead, but I would love to fix that. Oh, I did bring the tools to adjust the rack on the pump. We need to do that. You'll notice I'm keeping the glove box door open. That's because it makes a horrible rattling noise here. It's on the list. You know, this 3-on-the-tree transmission is just normal car stuff. They figured out how to bolt it to the diesel, and since it makes no power at all, they figured it would be fine. How do you like the dash-mounted rear view mirror? It's pretty cool. All I can see in it right now is taxi sign now. Hopefully this thing drives even nicer now that things are not loose. We'll see though. Oh, I was gonna try and permanently fix the belt, but I didn't. Alright, well, so far there's really no more power available on tap. It's kind of a funny thing. The throttle doesn't quite do what you would expect when there's no load on the engine, because that load is what fuels it. miles an hour, flat out in first. I hope that was a rock. 33 in second. Second and third are synchronized, or they're supposed to be, but they kind of grind. That belt noise is horrible. I feel bad. It didn't make belt noise when it got here, but only because it was totally loose and the alternator wasn't doing anything. Okay, well, it is actually accelerating in third gear now, kind of. Maybe the clutch isn't fully disengaging. This is where I'll usually floor it on a test drive, and it just doesn't do much in this car. I was expecting slow. This is something beyond slow. It's terrifyingly slow. You know, even if it is the slowest vehicle ever built, it's still fun. And you know, everyone that sees this on the road is going to be confused and slightly impressed. Just wait till they hear it. Or smell it. It's so funny, you think of a diesel as being torquey, but it's not really that either. It makes no horsepower or torque. Well, it's still dripping, I can tell you that. It's just absurd. What an absurd thing. I love it. It's so weird hearing suction-y, vacuumy noises from a diesel. I think there's actually a leak back here in this air hose. This is some kind of crazy oil bath air cleaner assembly. I believe that's why there's oil everywhere here. How do you like the ether injection hole? Yeah, cold starting might be a bit of an issue with this thing. It does actually have a glow plug grid heater thing mounted in the intake manifold. I was told it doesn't really work, but I tested it earlier and it did get warm, so I don't know. Tomorrow morning we'll see if this thing will actually start without the giggle gas. According to the instructions, the basic point of this adjustment screw, the rack limit at the back of the pump that I've been playing with, is to keep this thing from smoking while allowing it to get as much power as possible. What you're supposed to do is loosen the screw until you start seeing smoke out the exhaust under acceleration. Then screw it back in until that goes away. That's basically your best tune. Aside from on cold start, I have yet to see a bit of fuel smoke out the back, so I just cranked that thing out another like 3 turns. Because I like big changes. We'll see if it gets any better. Of course, the other important aspect there is fuel economy. If all of your fuel is going out the back as black smoke, it's not making power, and that's a waste. Anyway, let's see what it do. expected that to actually make a difference. I wonder if the rack is like stuck or something. It just does not seem to be going to full fuel. This could also be an issue with that governor. In fact, it's probably an issue with that governor. Okay, well, I don't know, maybe I'm crazy. I need to break out the stopwatch. But that does seem a little bit better. Man, I'm seeing these headlights, the low beams reflecting off signs up there. Maybe I'll be able to see at night. That can be nice sometimes. I mentioned that glow plug grid heater control. That's this. I feel like this light should be on that circuit, but it's not working. But you can hear the heating fan dip there. That's from that plug drawing power. It definitely works. All right, well, I can see this oil filter housing dripping, so that solves that. I'll have to pull that canister thingy out. I'm sure that is a stud that goes all the way through, and there must be some flat gasket or O-ring on the bottom that's messed up. This whole alternator mounting situation is just stupid. I'm gonna have to think about this. I could have that tensioner coming from over here on the water pump. That would make a lot more sense than whatever nightmare this is. So yeah, we'll definitely be addressing that in the future. This is not a hot rod. No one could ever misconstrue this as a hot rod. There has to be more power in it than this. It has to be able to do normal road speeds. It has to be able to work as a normal car, right? From the moment I saw this car online, I was excited. It's so weird. It's quirky. I'm hooked. Yeah, it's aggressively slow and it smells terrible and I'm gonna have to go burn my clothes now, but I really like this thing, and hopefully the Dead Dodge Garage viewing public at large feels the same way, because we're definitely going to be seeing some more on this. I know the paint job on this thing is going to look pretty darn good on camera. I promise you it's not as good as it looks. There are a good few flaws, and yeah, it's a nice looking car, but it's not something that's so nice I have to be afraid to use it. I want to drive and enjoy this thing, and I foresee a highway trip or two in my future, if all goes according to plan anyway. I don't know, let me know in the comments what you think of this machine, and what you'd do with it if you owned it. Although if what you would do with it is rip the Perkins out and install like a big block, I'm not gonna do that. And don't say DeSoto Hemi, I'm already actively fighting that urge. No, we're gonna keep making horrible clattery Perkins Diesel sounds and crawling down the local neighborhood streets in Washington. Anyway, until next time, as ever, thank you very much for watching. And remember, dream big, fart loud.